So we spend a lot of time talking about work. We spend a lot of time at work. In fact, for the majority of people, the majority of our waking hours are spent at a job. And for some, work is a gift, right? Some people enjoy their work and they find hope and connection and joy in the tasks that accompany that. They come home and more days than not, they're like, I like my job. This is a pretty good gig that I have. And for others, work is not a gift. It doesn't feel like a gift. It feels more like a curse. You come home at night and you're tired, you're burned out, and you wonder, when might there be some relief? When might there be another job on the horizon? And the truth of the matter is, there is no perfect job. That every job, even those jobs that we believe we were made for, even those jobs that feel like a perfect fit, they come with seasons of plenty and seasons of not so plenty, seasons of joy and fulfillment and seasons of frustration and emptiness. There's no getting around this, right? Sometimes even the best of jobs feel like a grind. That's why it's called work. However, few people would say they're in a job that they absolutely love, right? And my hunch is that many of you are continuing your education here at ACU because you're either looking to advance in your career, or you're switching careers entirely, or you're finding ways to supplement your income, or you're wanting to add a sense of satisfaction or fulfillment in your life. In other words, you're likely here at this moment because you fit into that latter group, those who at best don't always feel a sense of connection in their work, or at worst, feel a constant and persistent sense of disconnect. And the argument I want to make tonight is that every job, with a few exceptions, holds the potential for human connection and connection to what we believe God might be up to. I believe this. From working at a fast food restaurant, to being a nurse, from being a day laborer to being a teacher, nearly every job holds the potential for meaning. Let me begin by defining this word, vocation. It's used in any number of different ways. It's used all over the place, and depending on who says it, there's going to be a different meaning. And I'm not saying that my definition is the best or the only one. It's just the one that we use here at ACU Online to frame what we mean when we use the word vocation. So vocation is taken from the Latin root vocare, which means calling, to call, to name, which is derivative of the Latin word vox, which means voice. So when I talk about vocation, I talk about the three voices of vocation. First voice is the voice of our identity. That is those particular longings and passions and gifts that we bring to the world theologically. In both the Jewish and Christian tradition, this is the imago Dei, the image of God, that God has created each of us uniquely, and that we each have something unique to offer the world. That's the first voice, voice of identity. Second voice I talk about when talking about our vocation and vocational formation is the voice of our context. This is the world around us. It includes our work and the jobs that we have, but it's not limited to that. It includes our neighborhoods and our homes and the third spaces, community centers, or pubs, or coffee shops that we frequent. It includes faith communities. So the voice of our context is essentially the corner of the world that we inhabit. And third is the voice of God, that transcendent, mysterious other that we believe is pulling us into God's preferred and promised future when all things will be made right. And so the primary capacity when it comes to our vocational formation is listening. It is paying attention to these three voices, listening to the voice of our identity, listening to the voice of the context around us, and listening to what we believe God might be up to. And the good news is that everything we need is at our disposal. It's at our fingertips. Who we are is here. The world around us is here. We trust that God is here. So that's the good news. We don't have to produce anything or create or manufacture. We just have to listen to the things that are already here. Good news. The bad news, or maybe the difficult news, is it's much easier said than done. Who we are can be a little bit hard to sift through, right? We all come with different kinds of baggage, with struggles, with different pathologies, that being an integrated self, so that the person that people see matches with who I actually am, that takes some work, right? Listening and attending so that we can be an authentic, integrated person in the world takes a lot of work, and for some years of therapy. That's the case for me, at least. Also, listening to the voice of our context is not easy. We are incredibly busy. We go from one thing to the next. We're held captive by our to-do lists. And so to be present to the person or the situation that's right in front of us is not always easy. Have you ever gone through a day and you've realized, even though you've gone to 4 or 5 different places, grocery store, coffee shop, work, that you can't actually remember who you encountered? Right? You may have passed tens, if not hundreds of folks, but because we're always busy thinking about the thing we just left or the thing we're going to next, we're not present to the person right in front of us. So listening, attending to the voice of our context is not always easy to do. And then finally, the voice of God is not always easy to attend to. I'll speak for myself that listening to the voice of God has been a lifetime pursuit, and I seldom get it right. That more times than not, what I think is the voice of God is just my own desires that I'm projecting onto God. And I get down the road and realize, ooh, that was a lot more about me than it was about God. That's just me, not saying that's everyone's experience, but thankfully God's faithful to show up even when I get things wrong. But attending to the voice of God is, and that which God is doing in the world is not always easy to do. Now, it's important to keep in mind that these 3 voices aren't mutually exclusive. I know that when I'm paying, or when I'm seeking to pay better attention to who God is, I see the world around me a little bit more clearly. In the same way as I try to attend to who I am, paying attention to the voice of my own identity, I see and I hear God more clearly. That these 3 all inform one another. They are concentric circles overlapping. And so the definition for me when it comes to vocation is really about one's posture in life. It includes our work, as I said, but it's not limited to our work. Our vocation and attending to our vocational formation is not fundamentally about what we do for a paycheck. It is fundamentally about what kind of person we want to be in the world. What postures do we want to take towards others? What postures do we want to inhabit and embody? What habits or practices keep us grounded and centered? What do we care about most? And how do we orient and prioritize our lives so that we actually are able to embrace those things that we care most? Vocation is, what kind of person do we want to be in the world? In this way, I'm career and job agnostic. I'm a terrible career coach. And by career job agnostic, I mean this. I don't care so much, or should I say, I care less about what kind of work you do, and more, what kind of person are you going to be regardless of the work that you do? So I do this exercise in nearly every group that I meet with, called Dwelling in Our Vocation. It's a really simple reflection and reflective exercise. I ask people to identify a moment when their work was meaningful, when they experienced a moment of meaning. So a moment where they experienced gratitude or hope or joy or connection with a colleague or client, or maybe a moment where they felt a connection within them, their own sense of self. So try to identify one particular moment where they experienced meaning. And I've done this, I think, well over 100 times now. I've done it in small groups of 5 people. I've done them in large rooms of 300. I've done it in different countries. And across the board, when people reflect on a moment of meaning, a moment when they experience joy or hope or goodness or connection, across the board, they're small, ordinary, seemingly mundane moments. I remember a teacher talking about having a rough day at school. And on her way out to her car, a colleague saw her, chased her down, and just said, "Hey, are you okay? It seems like you've had a rough day." But that moment when somebody else saw that she was in need and she was able to go, "You know what? I've had a really rough day." That's the moment she identified. I remember an administrative assistant at a university telling the story of a moment of laughter with a colleague. And she couldn't even remember what it was about. But they were laughing uncontrollably and got the giggles even into the next meeting. And there was something about that moment of laughter that stood out to her. I remember a nonprofit worker sharing a moment when they watched a client who had really struggled be resilient through just one small, ordinary hurdle. Just watching that client be resilient made them think like, okay, I'm doing something in this world. I remember a nurse talking about the significance of when a patient reached out and touched her arm and said, "Thank you." Across the board, regardless of context, these are the kinds of moments that people identify as meaningful. So why does this matter for you? Why does this matter for us? Why does this matter for a conversation around our work? I want to give 2 big theological reasons why. At the end of the day, I'm convinced the most basic core need that we have as human beings is to be seen, is to be known, is to be loved. And so these small moments where we see others or when others see us, they aren't so small after all. They touch on the core desire and the longing that we have as human beings, the longing that we've been created with. And this connection, this moment to see others and to be seen, this moment to help others feel as if they're known and loved, it can happen anywhere, even in jobs that currently don't bring us a lot of life, even when we're doing tasks that are frustrating, that we want to move on from. More times than not, there are human beings who are present in those same jobs. And even if it's disconnected, and more times than not, it is disconnected from the work itself, we have the opportunity to see others and to let them know that they're known. That is no small thing. So that's the first theological reason I want to give you, that we were created to be seen, to be known, and to be loved. And any opportunity to do that, even when it's small, is a moment that matters to us and to those with whom we share it. Secondly, I believe that God longs for the world to be a place of human flourishing. I think God created the world to be a place of goodness and wholeness, and where relationships are right, where everyone has enough, that God loves this world. So much so that he sent his son. And so any moment where we participate in human flourishing, I believe, is a moment that God cares about. A teacher that's attending to the emotional and intellectual and social development of a child is a moment that God cares about. A therapist that makes space for clients to work through trauma, or couples to work through struggles in their relationship. Like creating that space and attending to that space, even when God's name is never mentioned, that moment of flourishing is something God still cares about. A nurse attending to the well-being, an IT manager or IT worker helping an organization run smoothly, a business person that keeps an orderly account of the business. Like, these are all moments that I believe God cares about, because as it contributes to a flourishing world, as it contributes to humans themselves flourishing, God delights in that. God wants that. God wants to join that. And sometimes I think what's required is that we need to place ourselves in the larger picture of things to get a better sense of where we belong. For example, my father-in-law has been a pastor for his entire life, and as he's getting close to retirement, he's picked up a job as a bus driver, and he absolutely loves it. And he loves it because he knows he's a very small part in the lives of these children as they're being formed. That even though he's not teaching them, even though he doesn't spend the bulk of the day, he gets to provide this little small space where children can safely get to the place where they're being formed. He gets to call them by name. He gets to know all the little details of their lives as they sit behind him and talk his ear off, right? He's placed himself in the larger picture of what it means to participate in human flourishing. So wherever you find yourself this evening on the spectrum of satisfaction when it comes to your work, let me throw out a few suggestions for you. And I mean this, whether you feel really fulfilled in your work or you're really struggling. I think these are things that we can all benefit from. I want to invite you, when we're done this evening, to take a few moments and reflect on a moment of meaning that you've had recently. If you're currently not working full-time or not even working part-time, I want you to think of your life outside of your home. Maybe you volunteer, maybe you're part of different groups. Identify a moment of meaning, a moment of joy or gratitude or hope or connection, and what might that moment teach you about who you are, and how might that reflection and that awareness open up possibilities for you, right? So maybe you come up with a moment where you did have a connection with a colleague or someone you work with. How might you be able to create more space to be around that colleague more? Or maybe there's a task that brings you joy more so than the other tasks. We don't have full agency or control over all that we do in our work, I know. But are there small ways to adjust your work so that you're able to give just even a minute or two more to those places that you know bring you life? So do that exercise when we're done this evening. Think about, what moment have I experienced that was meaningful, and what can you learn from that? Secondly, I want to invite you to look for people who might need to be seen or known or loved. Perhaps it is someone you work with, a colleague, a coworker, perhaps it's a customer, perhaps it's even a boss. But trusting that we all long for human connection, what are ways that you can be present to the people that are right in front of you? Connected or not to the actual task of the job, how can you be present in a way that helps others know and experience that they are seen? Three, take some time thinking about ways that your work contributes to human flourishing. I have a friend who used to be a manager at Chick-fil-A. And when he was exhausted and hated the job, he was going through school, he was reminded of a man who was experiencing homelessness, who would sit in their lobby during the winter months. And that for that time, there was space for this fellow human being to be out of the cold. Right? It's not necessarily connected to Chick-fil-A in any way, except it's space where someone is able to get a free cup of coffee and to simply be seen, right? Or a grocery store, perhaps you stock shelves. Helping people, being a part of the larger picture of helping people get basic needs, that's no small thing, okay? So find ways where you can zoom out and see the big picture. 4, almost done. What brings you life outside of work? How might you do a bit more of that? Sometimes finding connection and meaning in our work requires that we actually find ways to recharge outside of our work. Sometimes this is figuring out better boundaries between home and work life. But sometimes what we need to experience greater connection and to feel a little bit more alive is what outside of our jobs brings us life. Finally, I want to say this: be present. Be present with yourself. Be present with your context. Be present with what you believe God might be up to. We will never lose. We'll never. We'll never. Let me put it another way. We'll always win. We'll always benefit from being present to that which is right in front of us, the person, the context. It's easier said than done, I know, but presence really in this whole conversation around our sense of vocation and who we want to be is, I believe, key.